Hello, and welcome to No Summary, Golden Thread's live stream series of conversations with artists who don't fit in a box. Golden Thread is the first theater company in the US devoted to plays from or about the Middle East. We were founded in 1996 by playwright and director Torange Yeghiazarian, and we are based in the unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land, known colonially today as San Francisco, California. My name is Heather Rastovac Akbarzadeh. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the program manager of Golden Thread Fairytale Players, our theater for young audiences program. By way of visual description, I am a white woman with shoulder-length, medium brown hair, and I am wearing black rimmed glasses and a olive green long-sleeved blouse. Behind me is a tall wooden screen with geometric carved patterns. Today's No Summary episode is entitled, What Can the Wise Fool Nasrudin Teach Us? Bringing Middle Eastern Storytelling to Young Audiences. For this conversation, I'm delighted to welcome three arts, culture, and education professionals, Sarah Al-Kassab, Sabria Hassan, and Angela Norton Tyler, who I will introduce in a moment. Today's discussion will focus on the importance of theater arts education for young audiences during this particular historical moment. And more specifically, we will discuss this year's Fairytale Players production, Nasrudin's Magnificent Journey to Samarkand, written by Torange Yeghiazarian and directed by Sarah Al-Kassab. Before I introduce our panelists, I would like to take a moment to welcome folks who are joining us here on Zoom, as well as those tuning in to the live stream on HowlRound and Golden Thread's Facebook page. Those here with us in the Zoom room, please feel free to utilize the chat function to post your comments and questions throughout the conversation. We will leave approximately 10 minutes toward the end for a Q&A. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Sarah, Sabria, and Angela, and I'll just take a moment to share excerpts from their bios, and then I'll ask them to further introduce themselves. Sarah Al-Kassab is a first-generation Jordanian-American who has been a core member of Fairytale Players since 2007. And as I've mentioned, she is the director of Nasrudin's Magnificent Journey to Samarkand, as well as this season's FTP touring stage manager and costume designer. Sabria Hassan, an Oakland, California Unified School District alum with a BA in history from SF State University, is a program manager with the American Association of Yemeni Students and Professionals, where she builds targeted literacy programs for Arab and Afghan students within the Oakland Unified School District. And finally, Angela Norton Tyler is a teacher on special assignment at Fruitvale Elementary School in the Oakland Unified School District. She has been involved in education as a college instructor, elementary and middle school teacher, literacy coordinator, reading specialist, educational consultant, and business owner. Long list of expertise that she brings. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Heather, for hosting.
Yes, my pleasure. So yeah, I just shared a few sentences from each of your bios. So I'd like to start with asking you each to please share a little more about yourselves and your relationship to Fairytale Players. Sarah, would you like to begin?
Sure. I've been a member of Fairytale Players initially as an actor, costume designer, eventually stage manager, and this year director since 2007 when we brought The Girl Who Lost Her Smile, which was a a modern version of a folktale from Iraq. And since then, we've brought stories from different specific cultures within the broader definition of Middle Eastern stories. And I'm really happy that we're having this conversation. And I'm really happy that we get to have this conversation in a way that everyone gets to share with us. So thanks to Golden Thread for making that happen. Thank you, Heather, for hosting.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Sabria or Angela, either of you want to pop in?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. As Heather shared, I am AAYSP Program Manager. And my role is to not only promote early childhood education amongst my community, but being a working mother, a wife, having a very busy home life, I understand and can relate to the families I serve. When I approach my families, I share my story and I hear theirs. And it's just making them feel connected. And our ultimate goal is to bridge the line of communication between the school community and our families. And ultimately having them a part of the full-on school community and being a part of their children's education. And we have been, Golden Thread has been a partner of ours from early 2020. During the pandemic, because of the pandemic, we did like a Zoom assembly, and had the activity guide that was provided by you all. The students loved it. It was, at that time, it was Layla's Quest for Flight. And then we had the pleasure of finally having an in-person full-on assembly at our 3 partner schools. And they were really excited. And so we were as well.
Thanks, Sabria. I have to mention what an incredible community partner that AAYSP has been for us, and I just want to thank Sabria personally for the tireless work of helping bringing our program to particularly schools in the Oakland Unified School District. So thank you, Sabria, for all that you've done with and for us.
Thank you.
Then finally, Angela, please.
Well, I'll just kind of piggyback on what you were saying about Sabria being such a good partner, because she's been an awesome partner for us at Fruitvale Elementary School. We had the play online during the pandemic when we were doing distance learning, and it was amazing. It was great. But then this year, the students are actually at school, and she approached us and said, can we do it in person? And everybody was like, in person with real people, like together? No one could even understand what this meant, but she made it happen, and I worked with her, and it was just incredible. It was like the highlight of the year, because it was the first time that we had guests on campus. Nobody had been able to come onto our school campus. And so I'll talk about that later, but as a TSA, which is a teacher on special assignment, different things, I'm responsible for doing different things, but this was actually something that I didn't know we were going to be doing, and it just turned out so amazing. So I really want to thank everyone who got that play at our school. Our kids loved it, and it was like the highlight of the year.
Nice.
Thank you, Angela.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you.
And thanks to you and all of the educators working over the past, generally during challenging circumstances, but particularly in the last couple of years, thanks to educators' tireless efforts to keep our young ones learning and engaged and cared for. Great. Well, I'd like to start with a broad question before moving on to specific questions about Fairytale Players and this year's production. And it's an open-ended question in any way you'd like to respond. And the question is, from your individual positions as arts, culture, and education professionals, what have you witnessed to be the value of art, especially the performing arts, for today's young audiences? So what is the significance of bringing art and cultural education to children in this particular historical moment? So whoever would like to respond, please go.
I'll go ahead and start, but it's like, in a way, I think you shouldn't even get me started. Because I'm gonna say like 3 things, and then I'm gonna stop, because I can talk about this all day long. When I first started teaching, I thought that, and this was years ago, I thought I had to make time for art, and I would really work hard, and I would pretty much devote Friday afternoons to doing art. And that was hard then. And that was 20 years ago, and I'm looking at it now, and it's almost impossible. Like the schools are so focused on test scores and assessments and standardized testing that teachers look at you when you say, art project, like, what are you talking about? Like, you really have to do art in your classroom, or to bring art into your classroom, or performing arts, or anything that's not like on a standardized test, is so difficult. And that's why even I'm not in the classroom anymore, but I work so hard, or I try to work so hard to get these kind of things into our schools, because if you just if someone's not making a concerted effort, it won't happen. Students go the whole entire year. They never see anything. They never do anything that's not like reading and writing. And, you know, if they're lucky, maybe some social studies and science. And so, you know, I just feel like it is crucial. I thought it was crucial 100 years ago. And so it's even more dire now. So that's why this is, you know, people act like it's extra. And I'm like, no, it's not extra. This is, you know, a whole part of your brain, your whole part of who you are is just being totally neglected. So I thought it was bad, but now it's even worse. And so it's more important than ever. So that's all I'm going to say, or else I will talk for an hour.
Thanks.
Thank you, Angela.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sarah or Sabria?
I'll jump in. That was so wonderful, Angela. That's what I was thinking. I was like, you know, here I am at 42 years old. When I was in elementary school, we had music and art at least once a week. And yeah, the more that we focus specifically on certain requirements, then we lose the opportunity for teaching music as math, you know, or engaging, you know, self-expression into PE or whatever it is. So I think it's really important as we learn to negotiate what we value as a culture here where we are right now, that we can still make it accessible. That's the main thing, is that you don't have to go to a private school with an art teacher to get art. And that's the beauty of Fairytale Players for me, is that we get to go everywhere. Hopefully.
Of course, especially I feel like teaching art, like I would say, especially through a cultural lens, gives children and young people the opportunity to develop life skills, creativity, confidence, and just the ability to work in like a diverse setting and like acquiring like team skills, right? So like for art and culture, it helps students learn and appreciate the different things, perspectives, and cultures around them. And it, like food, art brings different people together. And the culture aspect to it is it fosters appreciation, understanding, and belonging. So both it's a lot of skills that it can be done in a diverse way, like depending on the teacher, like what Golden Thread is doing. Like what sat with me, I guess I would say with the students that we work with, especially with our targeted students, they were really excited to have Golden Thread productions there. They were just like, what? Are they gonna do like Arabic music? Are they gonna be like, is this Turkish music? But they felt a lot of connection, and they just felt so proud, and was like, oh, and we love music, and in my family we're always dancing. And one student was like, and I don't think a lot of people see that of us, like Arab or Muslim families, that we dance and love music, you know. So it was just amazing. And I do feel like, especially in this time, art and cultural education is really, really important, especially during the pandemic, because it is, and that goes on to, don't get me started. I'm going to speak a little bit more about this later on, but it is very important for our emotional health, and it's a vehicle to maintain mental and emotional health for sure. Because we've definitely seen with the pandemic and students returning, there was definitely an increase in depression, anxiety, and I've even witnessed that with my own son. He was like, I can't be with my friends. He was going through a lot of anxiety and was very withdrawn. And what helped my son was art. He would sit there for hours, and he loves dancing, music. His art skills is just incredible. And I think that's what helped him through the pandemic and going back to school.
Yeah, related to things that you all have said, I attended the virtual conference of the National Organization for Theater, which is TCG, and I attended a panel called TYA, which stands for Theater for Young Audiences, COVID and the Social Emotional Needs of Young People. And one of the many fantastic things that the panelists addressed, one of my main takeaways was how theater educators working with teachers and students right now are learning that after, the past years of a pandemic and ongoing racial injustice, checking off the boxes for meeting XYZ educational standards, although demanded of teachers, but has become much less important than supporting the emotional needs of students, fostering inner and interpersonal relationships. And they even went so far to say, quite simply, providing students the opportunity to laugh. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, Angela and Sabria, working so much with students would have a lot to say about that, which you have. But I thought to myself, as I was listening to that comment, like, what better play to do that than Nasrudin's magnificent journey to Samarkand? And so with that, I'd like to move on to discussing Golden Thread Fairytale Players and this year's production of Nasrudin's magnificent journey to Samarkand. I'm just going to give a little overview of Fairytale Players and the play. So for those of you unfamiliar in the audience with Fairytale Players, we offer a dynamic repertoire of performances specifically for young audiences with plays based on traditions and folklore from the Middle East. We tour original plays in schools, libraries, community centers, and cultural events throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. Our plays fuse traditional performance styles from the Middle East, such as epic storytelling, dance, music, puppetry, and circus arts, and commedia dell'arte. So this year's production is a new interpretation of a play from the Golden Thread Fairytale Players repertoire, Nasrudin's Magnificent Journey to Samarkand, which, as I've mentioned, is written by Torange Yeghiazarian and directed by Sarah Al-Kassab. And this visually colorful performance is adapted from folktales centered around the comedic person Nasrudin Hoja, also known across the Middle East as Mullah Nasrudin or Juha. And he is a wise fool renowned in Central Asia, Turkey, Iran, and the Arab worlds. And the performance follows Nasrudin and his faithful donkey as they travel through caravanserais in Konya and Damascus, where Nasrudin's clever wisdom and propensity for exposing hypocrisy frequently get him into trouble. So I'd like to share some photos from our spring tour, which will also give me the opportunity to give individual shout outs to the production's creative team. And the photos I'll show were taken at an elementary school in San Francisco during our spring tour by photographer Amal Bisharat, who was also our rehearsal stage manager for the production. So Wendy, could you please show image number 1? So hello to our actors or players. So because Fairytale Players plays consist of only 2 actors who play many roles, we refer to our actors as players. And our 2 players here are Bedalia Albanese as player 1, and Bedalia is on the left, and Layla Modirzadeh as Nasrudin and player 2, and she's there with her donkey on the right. And of course, Sarah is in the center, and Sarah, as the touring stage manager, is at all of the shows with the players. And so image 2, please, Wendy. So this photo and the 2 that follows it are scenery and props designed and painted by Mokhtar Paki. And actually, Sarah, I was wondering if you could briefly tell us about the props and scenery in this image and the upcoming 2 images.
So this image features the map of the journey that Nasrudin takes from Bukhara to Samarkand. So you can see that it was quite an excessive indirect journey, and that's hopefully illustrated to the students so that they can understand why it's okay to laugh at him, because he didn't just go across directly to Samarkand. And we see a little piece of Bukhara village city in the side there.
Yes, next image. Thank you, Wendy. And then Sarah, could you
explain? And that is Bukhara city and village square, the small town.
And then finally this one.
And here we've left Bukhara on our journey with the map, and we are on a journey with Nasrudin with the traveling wheel, which kind of is an astrolabe compass that Bedalia Player One spins to create kind of a moving effect behind Nasrudin as he travels with his donkey.
Thank you, Sarah. Image 5, please. And this one here is Bedalia doing Sufi spinning, which the cast learned through a workshop with local performing artist Greg Angelo Herrera. And then image 6, please. Showing some more images. Image 7. This one's great. I love this one.
Oh, donkey.
And then Sarah, could you briefly tell us about this scene? I really
enjoyed
so
the last one was poor donkey collapsed on the road from being ridden too hard. And then we go to the donkey mechanic, which is an ode to our Arab brethren who are really good at car repair, and they treat donkey as a automobile. The kids always love that scene the best.
Yeah, it's very funny, and I love how the players are able to pivot between different types of colloquial accents, and so here they take on the accent of a car mechanic.
Oh yeah, Bedalia's is from New York, and Layla's is like a surfer dude from LA.
Yeah. Great. And then image 9, this shows a little of our audience from behind at the elementary school. And then image 10 is this photo shows a dance choreographed by Golden Thread resident artist Lisa Tatiosian. And which with time permitting, I'll show a video of this dance a little later in the program. Okay, thanks, Wendy. So Sarah, you have a long history with Fairytale Players, as we've discussed, and we've been very privileged to have you join us this year as the director of the play. I'd love to hear some of the significant moments for you from directing this play, and also what is for you distinct about this particular play from previous Fairytale Players shows.
Okay, so I'll start with distinct. I think the thing that's the most different about this show is that there's no like supernatural, there's like no fairy tale part. It's all like human interest. There's no like visiting magical bird or whatever. There's always been some kind of like maybe fairy creature, whatever you want to call it. So this one is all humans interacting as humans. And I think that is really important now while we're all learning how to re-interact with humans. You're like, what? For me, what was important about this play, aside from like character points, is that the script was so like, I mean, all the scripts that I work with for Fairytale Players have been written by Torange. And as an actor, you work on your lines and you work on the general story. But as the director this time, I got to see like how simple things become so important. And I think that's also related to the wise fool himself, and that it was like written in a way that even if you don't understand it the first time, you're going to understand it the third time. So I think the script writing for Nasrudin was like the like most different thing, and that it didn't include those mystical elements, which I think is rich and vast in Middle Eastern culture, but is also often, like, oh, we only know about genies, or we only know about this or that. So it was cool to just be, we're people, this is a people story. It's definitely folk tale this time. And it's something that's so broad that we found out that, Nasrudin made his way to southern Italy, and he has a Jifa name is like Juha, and everything. We got to see how broad this clown character has, infiltrated, perpetrated, whatever, throughout all cultures.
Yeah, I agree about the script as being this really what can seem very simple, but actually has so much depth and layer, which is a Nasrudin folktale quality as it is, and then Torange's expertise at kind of conveying that in a play. And as I contact schools and community centers and libraries, I always get the question, you serve audiences between 5 and 15 years old. That's a really huge age difference.
2 groups, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I feel that this play particularly actually can, somebody who is 5 and 15 can take away. It's simple enough of a story that a 5-year-old can enjoy it, but also the depth of the morals of the story and how it happens and unfolds can really impact a 12, 13, 14-year-old as well, which I think is a Nasrudin thing, but also, a shout out to scriptwriter, Torange's work at writing this play. So thanks for that, Sarah. And Sabria or Angela, how for you was the experiences in the reception of the play for you personally, and for the students you observed attending the play? Were there things that you saw resonating with them?
I agree with Sada about, I really enjoyed Nasrudin's magnificent journey to Samarkand because it was kind of like a depiction of Middle Eastern people communicating with one another and on a human level, instead of when you see representation from the Middle East, it's always something either very mystical, like the magic carpet, the genie, or the bad guy in a film.
Right.
It's never like any normal
Anything
interaction.
in between.
Yeah, like it's like they're either so mystical or they're bad. So that's kind of like what I grew up always seeing that depiction play out all the time, and that kind of does take a toll on your confidence and how you interact with people in society. Like you're a little withdrawn, but like you learn over time that all those depictions are not true. But I do want to honor you all, Sada, and the Fairytale Players, and Heather and Torange, and all that you guys do, because we had the wonderful opportunity of having you all come in and do 2 plays at Allendale Elementary, and then at Fruitvale there was 2 plays performed, and then at Lockwood there's 3 plays performed. And we did that because we wanted our school community to feel safe, making sure that we're like separating the students by grade level and making sure that the room isn't overcrowded. And the students were really excited. Like, for instance, some of our targeted students, like are the students we serve, which is a majority of Middle Eastern students, they felt a connection because there were some Arabic words thrown in the play, like inshallah and stuff. And so they were like, oh, I know that word. I've seen a lot of like excitement, and the students, it takes a toll on their confidence. Like they feel confident. They're seeing a positive representation of Middle Eastern folktale being played out right before their eyes. Another thing that I've noticed from some of our students is they really love the costume, Sada. Like it gave me very like Turkish Moroccan vibes. And one of the students that I work with was like, we kind of wear something like that because, we're originally from Yemen, and they're like, it's called jalabia. And like, it's very similar. Like I wore something similar on Eid. So we usually on Eid wear traditional clothing. So it was really cool to see that. And then another thing that really resonated with me was Nasrudin, when he was traveling with his donkey, and he was either riding his donkey or walking alongside his donkey, and everyone always had a comment. Everyone always had to criticize him, but it does show you that you just have to be happy. If you keep doing what other people want you to do, you're not going to be happy, and neither will they stop judging you. So that's an important message. One of the messages, there are many more messages in there that I felt like even adults can enjoy the play, and it was not just for little kids, because I really enjoyed it. And that was really wonderful to see.
Thanks, Sabria.
I'm going to jump back in there and say, yay, on the costumes. And yes, every time a kid's like, hey, that looks like Egyptian. Is that Egyptian music? I think you're Egyptian. Like just like immediately identifying, when they don't get anything to identify with. And a specific moment, I missed that one for you, Heather. A specific moment was definitely at Allendale in Lockwood when kids in the front row were so excited while the dance was happening. They were like literally doing the dance. They were like, oh, literally doing the dance moves while the actors were doing them because they thought that they were so cool. That was like a moment for me.
Yeah, and that was all students too, not just the Arab students. I've seen all
Right.
students
Oh,
get up and
absolutely.
dance. Like they were feeling the music.
Angela, how about you?
I would say that one of the things that I just thought was so phenomenal was that it was a folktale that students didn't know already, a lot of students, because the thing is they read a lot of folk tales and fairy tales in their English language arts curriculum. I mean, that's like a big thing to start the year off with folk tales, but it's like the same ones,
Right.
like we all know, we've heard them a million times. So
Very
it's
Eurocentric ones.
I mean, it's super Eurocentric. And so, we had a new, ELA, English Language Arts curriculum, and it's more diverse than it has been in the past, but it's still not as diverse and inclusive as it should be. So this was just phenomenal to me, just for them to be able to come in and hear a folktale or see a folktale that they have not seen before. That just the newness of it was exciting, and they were excited about that. But then again, on the same side of that is that it is kind of familiar. It wasn't some a crazy thing that they could not relate to. So it was like, oh, this is a different culture maybe, or a culture that I'm not familiar with, but I can relate to it. We have many things in common, and so I think it's powerful that it was different, but also the same. So I just feel like that was just a huge part of it, that they could learn something new, but also feel like this is something that they understood. So that was great. And it's so funny also, Sabria, that when you reminded me that we had two different, they came twice, they did two different productions, because that was not only the first time that we had people come to our school like that, it was the first time that the kids had gotten together in the auditorium like that. And for the kindergartners and the first graders, they've never been to anything like that, because of the pandemic. So I mean, they just could not understand what we were doing in there to begin with. They were like, wait, what are we doing? Get on the floor. People are, they were losing their minds.
What a rite of passage.
They were great.
Part of.
I mean, it was, even when the school, we do things together, it was always outside on the playground. So this really was like a special thing. And so I just really, the kids just talked about it for the rest of the school year. So it was huge. It was huge.
That's fantastic. Well, thanks.
It couldn't have been done without Angela's pushing. I was pushing, Angela's pushing. We were both.
Yeah, thank you both, really profoundly. Since we're halfway through, I'm just gonna add, for those in the audience, if you're just joining us, this is No Summary, Golden Threads live stream series of conversations with artists who don't fit in a box. And we are in conversation with Sarah Al-Kassab, Sabria Hassan, and Angela Norton Tyler about Golden Thread Fairytale Players, our Theater for Young Audiences program, and this year's production, Nasrudin's Magnificent Journey to Samarkand. And I continue to invite our live audiences to share your questions and comments in the chat for the Q&A portion toward the end of our program. And speaking of the kids, I'm gonna briefly show a few photos from our Q&A. And then I'd love to hear a little bit more from Sarah. You mentioned the kids dancing, but some of the memorable responses you heard from the students as the touring stage manager conducting the post-show Q&A. So Wendy, if you could please show image 11. We're just gonna go through these, and then now image 12.
Raise your hand if you have a question.
And image 13. Oh, thank you, Wendy. So Sarah, would you like to share a little bit more about things that you saw in the Q&A?
Specific for this show, the Q&A, they always want to know why Nasrudin is played by a female. We have to explain about the magic of theater, like a practical thing. Like, where's Donkey's legs? They're Nasrudin's legs. Why did he die? He didn't die. He just collapsed. He's okay. My favorites were, though, when we asked, the things like the moral of the story, like why do you think Nasrudin fed his coat at the end of the show, or at the end of the story? and the kids literally got to repeat word for word from the script. Kids that they heard the show one time and they could give us back the script. They said, you can change the coat, but you cannot change the man. So they knew right away on the show, aside from the dancing, aside from the like cultural identification, but like, oh, that looks like what we wear, or that music sounds like our music, or, we know what baklava is. Just them having so much retention, something that they saw one time. It's not like they watch it over and over and over again. And for them to really be able to give that back to us like right away, and multiple people wanted to, have the opportunity. I mean, there's always
so many hands
raised.
raised.
I mean, there's always the question, there's always one question you're like, they always want to know how old they are, the actors. They always want to know where your family's from, which we usually do say. And then my favorite one that Layla really liked was, what is your favorite candy? Question for the actors. What's your favorite candy?
This is very important.
A very important question.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to share an excerpt from our audience survey from this past spring tour. It addresses some of the things that you all have brought up already, and I'll ask us to continue elaborating. So this was written by a teacher at an elementary school in San Leandro, California, and this teacher writes, quote, "Thank you for coming to our small school. This was one of the most engaging plays I have seen at a school. I learned new words, names of places, and walked away with a beautiful story to tell others with a very appropriate moral that applies to us all today. As a 22-year veteran teacher, this is the first time I witnessed a play at a school by actresses of Middle Eastern descent. It warmed my heart to see how excited the student from Egypt was to watch the play." End quote. So you all have addressed this, but let's continue to address how representation matters, especially for young people. How do you think Fairytale Players and this show in particular expand the limited representations about the Middle East? If you have anything more to add that you haven't already.
Can I add one thing that's a little bit off topic, just a little bit? I just want to say, Sarah, when you mentioned that the students were able, they had such good retention and were able to like repeat back the storyline, I thought about how excited their teachers were. And this might seem weird, but okay, so they all year long are prepared for the standardized test at the end of the year. And one of the things you have to be able to do is answer questions a certain way. Like you have to be able to, answer the question by repeating the question and being able to include information from the text. It's like all year long, they get that drilled into their head. And so when you asked a question to them and they were able to pull information from the play and repeat the question, their teachers were so thrilled. I thought I saw some of those teachers over there crying because it was like you answered in a complete sentence and you used information from the play. It was exciting. I'm always happy when they could do something that's not necessarily academic, but it does make me super, super happy when they're able to use their academic skills together in with art. So I just wanted to let you know that you made the teachers happy.
Yeah, and I think that goes to show the value of art, the experiential, multimodal ways of learning, right? That exactly. Maybe for some, that type of learning and receiving of knowledge is more effective than sitting and reading a textbook, right? So to think of the multi ways in which learning happens for different individuals is, I think, really key. And they showed through this experience of the performance, the skills that we're trying, teachers are trying to do in other places and spaces, right?
Right, because we're also always explaining to them, we're trying to convince them that, being able to have a conversation where you can have facts and you can use, background knowledge and, it makes you a better conversationalist. And it just proved it, because I think that the Q&A the questions that they asked and your response and their response, it was just at a higher level than I usually see or I've seen in the past. And so it was a nice opportunity for them to use the skills that I don't know if they really believed were, were important outside of maybe a standardized test. So I just wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for adding that.
Yes, I mean, it was so wonderful to be able to get them going in a conversation, especially after they obviously liked the show. So giving them that space, aside from, self-identification and what Sabria said about, confidence in seeing your culture or a nearby culture or any other culture represented in a positive way. The engagement was really strong for this one.
Yeah, and I love the activity guide you guys always send 2 weeks in advance. So teachers can, get students ready for the play so they know all the background information, the history, and a lot of activities there. There's a lot of culturally responsive lesson plans, and that's what AAYSP lives by. We are here, we promote culturally responsive lesson plans. There was one done by Angela herself. And we have teacher partners in our schools who develop these culturally responsive books. They choose a book that is, Middle Eastern, and they write up a lesson plan, and we share those out. We do read alouds, and so that's what we live by. And we love that, we can work with you all and bring you guys on to our district. My answer to the question, because I feel this really touches my heart because, and this is why I'm in my role today, because growing up in the early 2000s, like I've always seen, I was about 7 during 9/11. And so I've always seen Middle Easterners like portrayed in a very negative way. And as I said before, it does take a toll on your self-esteem and just kind of showing up in the classroom. I remember being like hearing my family like so scared that we were going to go in internment camps, and that was always a fear that I had growing up. And so I was like, as I got older and more, educated and going into college and learning a little bit more about my history, because you don't get to see that in the classroom. It's always this winning side that's telling these historical narratives, and you only see one side of the story. And this is, it's really beautiful that you guys can shed this positive light on Middle Eastern culture and tell, like, even though some of the stories and plays might be a little mystical, which is cool because that's how we can, relate to that's how our students are drawn to this. And it's done in a very, artist cultural manner. So it's very wonderful to see that. And I believe Golden Thread Productions provides our young scholars with a positive representation of a historically marginalized community, a more realistic perspective instead of overly dehumanizing depictions made in mainstream media. And we really love you guys.
Thank you,
We love you,
Sabria. My heart is fluttering. Thanks for, your support and the resources you provided to me before developing the educational guide were really extremely helpful as well. And so the collaboration, I see this as a collaboration, and so that's really fantastic. Thanks for sharing. And I kind of have to share my joke, which is I never in my life thought I would do research on donkeys. In addition to the background of Nasrudin and the Silk Road and various components, cultural components of the play, I really enjoyed, surprisingly, my research on donkeys, and they often get the bad rap, right?
What an
but
ass.
Actually they have a lot of cultural significance historically in many places, right? But nonetheless, the other thing that I thought I would share too is, I've in my college classes that I've taught an article about how humor has the opportunity to break Islamophobic stereotypes because of the idea that that Middle Easterners or Muslims can't take a joke, that they're irrationally angry, right? And in fact, what this what this play does is show that not only do Middle Easterners have a sense of humor, but that actually humor is integral to the kind of cultural, the cultural stories, right? A way to convey cultural morals and values, and that it's integral to making that culture, right? So yeah, well, we have just a couple minutes before turning to the Q&A. I'd like to take a moment to show, it's quite short, the dance that happens toward the end of the play. And Sabria, this is the video that you took.
Thanks, Sabria.
Yeah.
I always have to hold myself from dancing
I
when I hear
know.
that.
Sarah, do you want to say anything quickly? That was choreographed by Golden Thread resident artist Lisa Tatiosian. Is there anything else you want to add to that before turning to Q&A?
Yes, Sabria, I also have to hold myself from dancing because it would be very clearly distracting since I'm like the back area in view. So I have to just like nod or tap my foot or gently clap. I always love the dance too. And I always love Lisa's dances.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm just looking here in the chat. I do want to share that Sheila Devitt's staff at Golden Thread says, Sarah, that mug is impressive. Silver drinking vessel.
My mermaid, pewter mermaid.
Wow. And then a panel, someone in the room named Tracy says, theater is such an intensely dynamic and multimodal learning experience. If we used it more, even to involving learners in production and performance in classrooms, they would wow the world, clearly. Are there any plans along those lines? And I'm assuming this is asking if Fairytale Players is intending to do kind of more hands-on workshops and in the classroom or perhaps in other. Sorry, my Amazon's being delivered at the moment. Ding dong. In the classroom or in other types of workshops and community centers. It is something that our small theater company hopes to start developing more, is more hands-on type of theater making and storytelling workshops with youth. Not currently, we're a little understaffed for making that happen, but hopefully in the long term. It's definitely a question we get a lot.
Oh, Tracy's my mom. Shout out, Mama.
Oh, hey, Sarah's mom.
Nice.
I did not plant that question, by the way. I'm sure she came up with it by herself.
Wow, I see where I see where your intellect comes from, Sarah.
That's wonderful.
And let's see. So we have, unless we have any other questions pop up in the chat, let's see, Q&A, that's still that. So I wanted to circle back as kind of my last formal question, circle back to the title of today's No Summary episode. What can the wise fool, Nasrudin, teach us? Or what can the wise fool archetype teach us? What is significant for you about the medium of humor as a means for conveying important messages, challenging the status quo, but also breaking stereotypes?
I'm going to go for this one. We are so only recently past a time when you couldn't trust any media at all. And we had to get all our media from the clowns. Like we didn't, I mean, more people watched The Daily Show than they watched the CNN. I'm saying, like, it was the only way to get any information. So I think that, you know, when the buffoons are running, the clowns are the answer, you know? That's the secret. So a buffoon always has a secret, right? A secret they won't share. And a clown never has any secrets. That's the thing. It's like everything's 100% open. So I think the clown character being able to come from a place of like innocent wonder and curiosity is the way to expose the nonsense that we are inundated with.
Mhm. How about
I agree.
How about you, Sabria or Angela? Do you think humor was just the tone that was needed during this particular time, or did that bring something specific and special at this time for the students?
Well, I was just thinking when we saw the clip of them dancing and also the students in the front. I mean, we saw the back of their head and they had on masks, but you could just tell that they were smiling and excited and having such a good time. And I mean, I think that's important. School should be fun. And I think, people forget that, and that learning while you're laughing, you tend to remember, and you're just more open to it. But especially now, I mean, it's been the weirdest after 20 years in elementary schools. This has been the weirdest year ever. This past year was even stranger than when we were doing distance learning. And so it's just not the same. It's just not normal anymore. And so just to see them just open and laughing and, dancing, I just think it's just powerful. I just think that whatever the story was, or the moral was, or whatever we wanted them to learn during that play, they were just so much more receptive to it because they were just so happy. So I just think it's just powerful at all times, but especially now.
Yeah, so I have a 4-year-old. She's about to turn 4 next month. So I'm inundated with all sorts of quotes and memes. But one of them that it resonates with me is "Play is the work of the child," and it may be a Mr. Rogers quote. I'm not exactly sure, but at 4 years old, they think, okay, play is the work of the child, but actually that the essence of play should be, 5-year-olds who are starting and doing these standardized tests, they're not any different than a 4-year-old who needs to learn through play, right? So I think, things like humor, playfulness, dance, music can provide that essential type of learning on so many levels. Sabria, anything you want to add before we close?
Yeah, I agree. I do believe humor is a secret weapon in communication, helping build bonds, and just connecting to our young students. Humor does more than just make these students laugh, but it compels them to think critically, and think about the conveyed messages through these wonderful plays, especially with Nasrudin's. I love how you can change the coats, but you can't change the man. That really sat with me, because you can even see in the play, he's stuffing his coat, his fancy coat, and it's everyone's why would he do such a thing? He's pouring a jug of wine and bread and grapes and all this stuff, and it's why? And then that wise old fool really had some wonderful messages.
You can't judge a book by its cover, right? That's another cliche that we can apply as a story to this, a takeaway. Well, friends, we have come to the end of our time today. And again, my name is Heather Rastovac Akbarzadeh, and I'm the Golden Thread Fairytale Players Program Manager. You can learn more about Fairytale Players on Golden Thread's website, www.goldenthread.org, under the Programs tab. And if anyone in the audience would like to bring or advocate to bring Fairytale Players to your local school, library, community center, or community event, you may contact me directly via email at education@goldenthread.org. Huge thanks to my wonderful guests, Sarah, Sabria, and Angela. It's been such a delight to be in conversation with you. A lot of just really touched by hearing your perspectives. And thank you to Wendy Reyes for technical support. I mentioned before the start of the show that Wendy is like the rock here. And to the rest of Golden Thread's small but mighty team, Sahar, our executive artistic director, Michelle, Linda, Sheila, and Naveed. And I'd also like to thank HowlRound for hosting this live stream event. A recording of the session will be available on both HowlRound and Golden Thread's website. And last but not least, many thanks to our audience for joining us today. Happy to have you in the Zoom room with us. All right, everybody. Thanks again to my panelists. Goodbye and take care.